She was only 21 years old when she was told she would never make it as a model. But nonetheless, 50 years ago, Beverly Johnson became the first ever black woman on the cover of American Vogue.
How defining was that moment?
It is a defining moment in anyone who's on that cover's life. Because of the power of Vogue magazine, really being the holy grail of the fashion industry, the Bible of the fashion industry, I think once you achieve that, whether you're an artist or whomever, it's a big deal. In order for me to be the top model in the world, which was where I was going, I needed that cover. I had covers all around the world, but I needed that cover.
So for a lot of people who don't understand, it's important that we give them a sense of the history that you created and why you're still relevant today, why it's important to hear voices like yours. Because following that moment, did you feel as though that was a turning point in the fashion industry?
No, I knew that it would become more important as time went on. And, people just have a way of, that's done, and people move on. As a matter of fact, I just started celebrating that cover. I was doing a reality show with Oprah Winfrey Network, and one of the producers said, isn't the anniversary of the Vogue cover coming up? And I was like, yeah. He said, well, why don't you celebrate that? I was like, oh, I don't know. Why don't I celebrate that? So I started celebrating year by year. And then it got to be 50 years. I'm like, whoa, now what do I do for that? And it's just really, it's not going to be important unless you make it important. A closed mouth never gets fed. And I understand that, particularly in business, but I didn't really quite comprehend that with this historic moment that I had in my life. And so now I understand it.
So from there, you then appeared throughout your career on 500 magazine covers. And as we say in the UK, you were slightly being ripped off because at the time, a lot of people might have not been aware you were being underpaid.
Well, the whole thing with magazines is they have the upper hand, right? And so they call it an editorial fee, which means you get very little money. And the fashion industry, particularly the modeling industry, is a very interesting place because we have no unions. There's no Screen Actors Guild. There's no insurance. There's nothing. It's really a wild, wild west, which is one reason why I work with Model Alliance, so that maybe we can set some kind of guardrails in this industry that's just like anything goes. So you just, so for me, early on, I knew I was an entrepreneur. I knew that I hired the agent. They didn't hire me, I hired them. And so you just, have to kind of work things through yourself and how to keep yourself relevant, go to another agency, upset the, people book you just to find out why you left that other agency, it's like, so that kind of independence I do like, but it would have been nice to have a few guardrails, some not so good photographers acting out and people just kind of ignore different things that are going on in the industry.
The 71-year-old supermodel thought breaking the highest glass ceiling would have led to changes, but 5 decades later, she says there's still a long way to go.
I know you talked over the years a lot about the prejudice and stereotypes that you experienced along the way. When you were obviously very young back then, did you realize, or was it in the back of your head, that I'm a black woman in an industry that may struggle to accept me or may struggle to give me opportunities because of the color of my skin?
No, I'll tell you why. I was a competitive swimmer. We were on an all-black swim team. We're talking about in the 50s. And we competed in the tri-state area against white teams. And so I learned a lot about competition, and I learned a lot about discipline. And when you're in the water and you're swimming a race, it's you and the other person, and you're competing with one another. And it doesn't matter if you're black in the water or white in the water. I'm going to beat you. I'm going to touch the wall first. So for me, that's my mindset of an athlete. And so that was my mindset when I got in the modeling industry. And, learning, I'm from Buffalo, New York. Of course, when we used to go to some of the white events, they would, let us in, it's cold outside, it'd be snowing and everything, and they don't want to open the door. And, when they opened the door, we competed. We just no hard feelings. We're here to beat, we're here to win, and we won a lot.
And I imagine you also had a lot of experiences with racism as well.
Yes, of course. You have that every day. I mean, you walk out to whatever you go, wherever you go, and you experience that. That's just a part of the world we live in. But it most certainly is not going to set me back in any way. It's just like, oh, okay, I know what that's about, and just keep moving on.
And do you think there's still a problem with racism in the fashion industry today?
I think there's a problem with racism all around the world, if it's colorism or whatever that's called. I think that, it's really kind of disappointing in a way for our country, because we say we're this big country and we purport to be a certain way, and we're not. So that kind of is a drag every now and then. But I also understand the pendulum is going to swing this way. When Obama came up, it was like, and we knew it was going to swing back hard, and it did. So it's not unpredictable, at least not for me.
And what would you say to people outside this country, and perhaps those who follow you and now aware of your story and the glass ceilings that you shattered, but feel that institutions and society are still holding them back because of the barriers that remain in place?
Yeah, I think that, it's great, the glass ceilings that are broken, and seeing a lot of yourself being represented in magazines and in advertising is really wonderful, because you have to see yourself represent to be able to feel that you belong. But now I'm really interested in this trillion-dollar industry, which is the fashion industry, and really having people that look like me participated in it economically. We're forward-facing. We're getting all the fashion right. This is Sergio Hudson. What I'm wearing is a black designer. He's incredibly talented. But now I think that we really need to be a part of the engine of the fashion industry. And one of the things that I did a Beverly Johnson rule. It was from the Rooney Rule. It was basically about the board of directors, because they make the policies. And most board of directors are white men. And with the Rooney Rule, the owners were the board of directors. And one owner, Rooney, said, hey, we got all these black football players, but we don't have any black quarterbacks or black people in the front also. We're all white here. He said, I don't think it's fair. So what we should do is, if there's an opening, we should just interview, just one. You don't have to hire them. It's just interview them. Just get in the room with them. And thus there's been a lot of change. I don't want to talk about NFL because I don't want my grandchildren playing football, but there's been a lot of change in that industry by just making the effort. And that's what I call on the fashion industry to do, with the board of directors, not with the forward-facing things,
How do you want people to remember Beverly Johnson?
I like to have a living legacy, one that's constantly in motion. I don't know whether that's a school or a library. I don't know what it is. I don't know really what it looks like right now. But I just know that I want to leave this industry in a better place, or in a place where they're moving forward.
Not a lot of people might be aware, but you also have a close relationship with Naomi Campbell. I mean, you knew her before she started walking on runways.
Yes. Well, she was new in town, and she was, the new model in town, and very beautiful, very tenacious, and a couple of times I picked her up in my car when she was running for a cab, and we were kind of passing each other. And this is when I was trying to do runway, so that must have been, it could have been like the 80s, the early 80s. And just watching her over the years and the body of work she's accumulated in the way of print work and runways is extraordinary. And I don't think there's another model on the planet that has done what she's done, and still going. And it means a lot. It says a lot about her. And so I say that because it's extraordinary, and I just think that should be known.